Right, so welcome to episode 19 of Unplanned with Phil Bland. And today I'm with Oonagh O'Hagan. Oonagh is actually my cousin. Uh,
Hello. Oh, we're
and
immediately revealing that.
but also Oonagh is the fashion lecturer at St Martin's College. She's also been on Strictly, helping them with some of their costume designs. She's written 2 books. And she was always coming back from London as my older cousin, telling us all about fashion tips and stuff. I'm pretty sure you told Babs about gold jewelry being in fashion about 3 years before it
Oh, did
came
I?
out. Yeah,
I think
pretty
gold jewelry's always in fashion. That's like probably saying like red lipstick. I
Or
obviously
there,
went for an easy in.
I'm pretty sure there was another one where there was like 1 year trousers with skirts.
Oh
Well,
God, really? We must be going
I'm,
back to the late 90s, I hope.
I'm pretty sure. So
Oh, you
yeah,
didn't take me up on any of the advice.
I don't know. I didn't anyway.
I was probably very much making it up.
Yeah, I know. Babs probably just brought it into fashion. Babs is my sister, by the way.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. That's what fashion is basically.
Yeah.
If you wear it confidently and everyone's like, that looks amazing, that skirt trouser combo. I'm going to do that. You've got a fashion trend.
I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Okay, send photos, not to me.
So, welcome to the show.
Hi, I like my intro. I should point out, you said I was the fashion lecturer at Central St Martin's. I like the idea that I was like this omnipresent, like
the one and
10,000
only
students. And so that, yeah. I'm a fashion and textile lecturer. I'm the
Fashion
head of the foundation fashion textiles. That's my real job. I have a real job
Wow.
by accident, but I do have a real job.
Formal title.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Everyone's always amazed that I'm actually employed. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I have an actual job because as you also said in my intro, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, absolutely. She's also doing an exciting project with Scrubs for the work that the NHS are doing at the moment. So we'll get onto that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I guess I've been kicking these off with just like, how are you coping with this crazy period that we're in? How's family life? How's work? How's it been working from home? Like, it must be.
Well, Phil, nobody's asked me that.
Yeah.
Not. It's in like 2 sections. So work has been very intense because our students are still studying. So we're still supporting them around the world. And that's actually been incredible and really interesting. Like I had a conversation with one guy where the whole time I was talking to him as though we were on like a massive satellite delay. And then at the end, I was like, so where are you? Where are you? And he's like, I'm in Halls in North London. I'm like, oh, all right. I thought it was in like Azerbaijan. So yeah, we've got students everywhere. That's been really cool. Pretty intense. Same with everyone. Suddenly you're talking about platforms and things 24/7. And also off the back of that, we were really concerned about the mental health of us, the staff, and our students suddenly feeling very helpless. And I'd actually phoned one of my best friends as a consultant, really successful consultant at the NHS. And I called her actually just to see how she was with her kids, to be honest. And then I asked about work, and she was like, it's as you can imagine. And I was like, oh my God. I said, can I help with anything? And I don't know if I really meant it, if I'm honest. It was disingenuous. It was like that one when you say to somebody, do you want a cup of tea? And they go, yes. And you go, I didn't mean that. Yes, exactly. And then I said, do you need the masks? Because I was thinking, I'm good with a glue gun. I can do this. And she was like, no, we've got masks. And she went, but actually, we don't have scrubs. I was a bit like, what? And this was very early days. And she said, yeah, we have to change them like 6 times a day. We're going through it. And I was a bit like, okay, but like, where are the official? And she was like, it's just not happening. And I was like, all right. So we had a bit of a conversation. And I was like, you know, and my students can do it, but they're like all over the world. They're in Azerbaijan, North London. And I was like, they can't get fabric. Could they just make it out of like, and I was a bit like, bed sheets, duvet covers. And she went, yeah, as long as we can boil it, it's fine.
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to do this. So I went back to my colleagues and I said, and also I was like, how many do you need? 1, 2. She was like, hundreds. And I was like, oh, okay. Went back to my colleagues, explained it to them. And one of the things we realized was you needed a pattern that you could print out on A4. So we worked really hard on adapting it so that you could just print it out and you could scale it up on wrapping paper, wallpaper. It was all that you could do it literally in one room. And we started doing it for her, and then it kind of got loads of press basically, and the public wanted to get involved, which was really nice. People were just like, we just want to try, we want to make. And also the other thing we'd said was, could you put a message into it when you do it, like a message of thanks or gratitude?
Yeah.
So it was very much about, you know, not just the wearer, the maker. And we couldn't believe it how much traction we got. People were really, really interested, because it was the idea of, I feel really lost, what can I do? And it wasn't about making hundreds of them, you know, it's making one or two, but actually loads of people have been doing it. So I've had amazing interactions with all sorts of people. And, you know, that's been really, really, really cool. I'm taking up an enormous amount of my time. But it was actually delayed because the news was saying everything's okay. But I was now having conversations with lots of different trusts and hospitals and different kind of grassroots groups. Loads of groups were beginning to set up, where it was like, I'm being told one thing, which is, oh my God, we need this. And yet I'm hearing on the news, it's fine. And so we went with eventually the doctors. we were like, we're just going to make these, you know, and if it's surplus, who cares? But it sounds desperate. And of course, then it became really obvious. I couldn't believe it. Within about a week of starting the project, I got one email from a trust. I can never say who they are, actually. I'm not allowed to say. And they were like, we've seen your project. Could you make us 1,000 scrubs for tomorrow? And I laughed. I was like, no. And then I got loads of these emails. And I actually was really quite upset, because I suddenly was like, oh my God, there's no plan B. I'm like a plan B. You know, it was like, oh my God, this is really, really full on. This is really serious. There is a serious issue. So for me, it's been amazing. It's been very full on. It's been extremely interesting. It's been also really interesting, making me understand things I'm interested in, because I got into design by accident, really, because I loved drawing, I loved people. I was really interested in making, you know, sort of the idea of making people want and desire things. But as I've got older, I guess that's turned more into wanting to do things that people actually need and maybe love, and it's not going to sort of, you know, fuck up the world, you know, which is probably pulling away from the old capitalist model, really. Because I came to London in a very hedonistic time, you know, where, you know, consuming and consumption was at its absolute max. And, you know, I'm actually doing a PhD as well about behavior. So before then, I was getting very interested in this idea of looking at what desire meant, and could you still enjoy and get real pleasure from things without them, fucking up the other stuff. So it's quite philosophical, but I believed we could. And in a way, doing this has really shown me that there is an appetite for doing things that feel good as well, not just you know, making for the sake of making, you know.
I was talking to Mark Hogarth, that I know, and he works for Harris Tweed, and we were talking about we were talking about this topic on the show, where we were talking about what clothes mean to you as a person. And often, like in the I guess, you know, that hedonistic period that you were talking about, people were buying clothes because of what it said about them, in terms of, you know, they would see the clothes as an extension of themselves, and if they bought an expensive, flashy piece of clothing, then that flashy piece of clothing would say that they are flashy and expensive, and so that's probably why they like it. And now it seems like we're moving to more like, what do your purchases say about you in terms of your ethics, and what you believe in? Is that something that you're seeing in the kind of move from in your time in fashion?
Yeah, and I mean, the problem is it becomes very kind of class based, that, you know, it's like, it's very, very close to food. So eating fast food, you know, is seen as a bit of a dirty habit in a way. You know, you're always like, you get literally a dirty burger, I'm going for a kebab or whatever. So we've moved from that sort of fast food. Again, when I was a kid, McDonald's was like the coolest thing, you know, in the world. We've moved away from that. You know, there's been this conscious move that, you know, eating trashy food, sometimes it's not even really food. You know, isn't a Pringle's got no potato in it? You know, it's like, it's not even
Really?
actually a food. That you know, people are beginning to be quite conscious about that, and it's quite funny. It's like we've worked from the inside out. And there is definitely a consciousness about, you know, well, if I'm buying, you know, 700 pairs of pants in this shop for like £3, what the fuck's going on there? Somebody is losing out majorly there. Though you've got loads of pants. And
you can never have enough.
Yeah, you can never have enough. But there is definitely a move, but I think unfortunately it will still be like a luxury that, you know, you have things that are ethical and sustainable. What will be interesting is if that becomes a norm and affordable, because of course fashion, cheap fashion, you know, is, we know now, very, very negative. We've known for ages it's really, really negative. And I mean, one of the things about the project, the Scrub projects, I'm really interested in. So we've got a sponsor, I'm not allowed to say, it's a big luxury company. And the reason I pitched to them was, it was like, look, you guys, things are looking bad for you, luxury. You either have to go to the 1%, which is what they're doing. If you look at luxury brands, they are getting astronomically expensive. I saw a cardigan for £1,000 the other day. My husband was like, do you like this cardigan? I was like, it's okay. He's like, it's £1,000. I'm like, it's not that okay. I was like, who wants a cardigan for £1,000? So they're pulling away so that there's the 1%, and then everybody else, you know, it's just sort of whatever. So I think that will be the interesting thing. Well, how much will we genuinely be exposed to it? Because it's not really quite often the consumer's fault. It's the production. It's not designers' fault quite often. I don't know many designers that have come to me studying, gone, what I really want to do is totally fuck the world and loads of my stuff get put in landfill. You know, nobody, that is not something you look for. So they're looking to, as I'm interested in, something that's you want and is desirable, but now they don't want it that it's for a month. Or if it's going to be for a month, we have to look at this, what we call, you know, the circular economy, the circle of design, circular design. You know, if it is only going to last for a month, what is going to happen to it? Afterwards. And I think what I worry about is it will become very class-based. It's like, oh gosh, you know, you're still doing X, Y, and Z, well, as I'm doing this. So that is something that would have to be careful, I think.
Yeah, but then again, like with it's also less about with clothes, you buy a piece, and if it's like going to last you for many, many years because it's good quality and it's not made to be put in landfill immediately, whereas like, you know, well-sourced food and things, they're just going to get eaten anyway. It's not,
so that's quite a big mind shift. So I would say, I mean, I hardly ever buy anything, and a lot of my stuff's secondhand, and I'm not very interested actually in kind of what I'm wearing. I'm much more interested in other people. It's like I've almost gone past that point. It's like what you were talking about that signifying, those signifiers, which a guy called Bart's, I've got his book down there, wrote loads about what that means. You know, if you buy a baguette instead of a loaf, what that says. It's like I've gone so far beyond that none of it means anything anymore to me. And I do think as a society we're beginning to get like that. But you know, marketers are very clever. They can make you desire anything really. And I think that's what I mean by it'll be really interesting to see the companies do take a bit of a moral stance. I'd be really interested to see if we get a more kind of socially aware capitalism, basically, that okay, making money might be one thing, but actually if you're making a workforce extremely unhappy, you know, what then? And I think people are unhappy. They feel unhappy. They feel like everything they're doing is having a horrible effect somewhere. You know, there's a lot of feeling like, oh my God, I'm not. I think that's been interesting as well with the lockdown, is people like, you know, oh my God, I'm not doing enough craft, or I'm not, you know, I've not got amazing abs yet, you know, and I'm not being productive. Which is the capitalist dream, that everybody thinks they've got to be this productive entity all the time.
And why do you think people feel like they need to be that productive entity? It's like ultimately, like on the marketers thing, it's that marketers, the thing that might change would be what people want to tell the world about themselves, but they want the world to think something of them based on their purchases. So it's like, maybe they don't want the world to think they're flashy and they've got new clothes all the time, but they want the world to think that they're ethical and these types of things.
But do you think we'll get bored of wondering what the world thinks about us?
I just think it's like, I think that is the only way that you can get to a place where you're completely happy if you can just stop comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah,
And
but that's what I mean. Do you not think we'll just start pulling away from that?
yeah,
We
well,
just, I mean, already, people say Instasham or whatever, so do you not think
well,
we'll
you
just pull
hope.
away from it?
Well, you kind of hope, but at the same time, there's these massive forces, technological forces,
Yeah.
that are kind of forcing you to constantly be comparing yourself to other people, because you're comparing yourself to the whole world now. You're not just
Mm.
comparing yourself to, your next door neighbor, someone in your neighborhood. You're comparing yourself to Kim Kardashian and
Yeah.
all of this stuff. So
Well, it takes a huge strength of character. And it's weird because I'm not particularly religious, but it comes almost like a religion
mm,
in that, are you durable enough not to worry about that?
mm,
And it's very difficult not to. I mean, I'm saying I hardly ever buy anything, but actually, if I saw something that I really, really wanted, I'd probably buy it because it's so rare.
mm,
It's so rare for me now to get that feeling
yeah,
that I don't, I would probably buy it because of that. But I don't think, I know personally, I've gone way past that. I wonder what somebody thinks of me from this.
hmm.
And I wonder if we will get to a stage where we're not that bothered at this idea of an audience that's
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and
But
that actually your audience is probably your family and friends.
but it's also, it's not just purchases. It's like any life decision. It's like a lot of the time, people, even though we're all different in so many different ways and we could all express ourselves, we all end up kind of funneling down these similar paths because of comparing with one another. And we think, oh well, so and so's respectable, so I'm going to copy that, their life decisions. I'm going to take that job, or I'm going to go for that gap year, or I'm going to do these, kind of make these life decisions based
Mm.
on what, sometimes what other people will think of me, and not actually. It's a really hard one, because how do you disentangle the making decisions based on your own inner compass versus trying to make decisions based on like what you think is going to be approved of by society.
Do you not think though you realize because you become unhappy? It's like you get to a point where you're like, I'm not very happy.
Well, I think it kind of, yeah, but people don't realize that the thing that's making them happy is that they're comparing themselves to other
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah. It's
think
the
what
awareness.
it's not, it's the awareness that's missing. And you can often find yourself in a treadmill, I think,
Mm.
where you think the next thing that's going to make you happy is that next short-term
Thing.
purchase or
Yeah,
next short-term decision. Well,
yeah.
that you think will satisfy you, but as you gain, each one of those will make you ultimately less satisfied, because the last time you achieved something or bought something and then threw it away, you feel kind of more empty than you did before.
Yeah. Well, again, like a lot of my research is into that idea. Does desire always have to be a lack? Does there always have to be something you feel like you're missing to feel that sensation of desire? And
Mm,
again, my argument is not necessarily, but you have to wean yourself away from different kind of modes of thinking. But I think everybody's brain's very sort of malleable. And I mean, in a way, I've always been really interested in that kind of like marketing and psychology. Like Edward Bernays, I was always really interested in his manipulation basically of people. And we are hugely easily manipulated. Like, I don't think people are inherently good or bad, apart from maybe like the odd total psychopath.
mhm,
So I think it's just almost training ourselves away from it. But
mhm,
that's what I mean by the corporations. They're the ones that think they'll lose out. And that is why I was so interested in working with a luxury company, because one of the things is, so it's not Burberry, but Burberry, I don't want to get into a legal problem. Burberry, very well known, burnt something like 28 million pounds worth of their stock a couple of years ago, because if it doesn't sell, they don't want it going into the grey market and going into sales shops. That's pretty scandalous, and that was a horrible PR disaster for them. So one of the reasons I wanted to work with a luxury company was like, look, if you want to give me money or your seconds or your old fabric to do this project, even if you're doing it utterly cynically, you're actually a really, really bad person,
mm,
and you're like, "Ma, I'm going to give them money so I look really kindly." I actually don't care, because if by accident you end up doing something quite sustainable, which is not burning millions of pounds worth of stuff and actually reworking it into key worker clothes, if by accident I've made you do something that feels
mhm,
more sustainable, ethically and morally more correct, fine. So you might have to start at a point where we wean ourselves like methadone off certain behaviors.
But
And it might even be that you have to dance with the devil. You have to do quite sort of cynical things to get to that point, to prove the point that actually, you know what, all round making money is good, but if everybody's very ill, it's not so good.
It's like, do you need to make it's like, are we able to do purely benevolent things without making it have to have selfish interest at heart as well? Like,
well, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? That idea of are people selfish? Yeah, people are your survival of the fittest. I think it would be a lie to say there's not something in it. But is it money or is it power? I think power is more the thing that people find very difficult to move away from, more so than something like success. It's what you think of. But in what I've done, I've seen people who've been, financially incredibly successful or very, very famous, and that in itself is not always, sometimes it's brought happiness, but I wouldn't say forever, because you have a massive trade-off somewhere. I mean, I think being really famous must be tough. I mean, I met a friend who was in a very well-known band, and I went to see him after one of his gigs. There were loads of fans, but loads of them seemed really weird, like really obsessive. And I was a bit like, you know what? It's kind of a shame, isn't it, that you can't pick your fans? Because I was like, they're quite strange. And it was like, yeah, they're my fans. I have to, this is what I do, and they are how I'm here. And I can feel myself going like, I'm not so sure. The same as being a designer. I've always freelanced and sold my stuff, because having your own brand, if somebody got into it that you weren't that keen on, you'd be like, oh no, they're wearing it again.
Well, it's kind of like you can't choose your audience as well.
Yeah.
You can't choose who's going to gravitate towards what you're talking. Like, I don't know who's going to gravitate towards watching these episodes.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
I can't choose the people that it's out there in the world. You express yourself in some way, you put it out into the world, you try and make it as authentically you as you possibly can, and then you just release it and then let the world kind of take it over. And maybe the person in the band, it's like you need to try, in any creative thing, try to not let it become a caricature of what you are or who you are.
Or you can't, or you have to not care.
Yeah, because but then people are kind of attached themselves to this kind of idea of something, but people are layered and textured, and you don't really know everything about a person just by even listening to them for hours and hours.
Well, that's the issue with something creative. It can feel like an extension of you, and people can feel very intimate with you and feel like, like, I get you, we get each other, and you're like, oh my God, I can't stand you, or you're really strange, I can't believe you're really into the thing I do, So that's also quite funny about doing anything where there's an output. One hand, it's very vulnerable, it's very exposing to do something creative and put it out there. It can be a real raw kind of, this is how I feel. And then you've got the next whammy of, one, people might not like it, but two, the people like it, you don't particularly rate, And I think again, you have to not worry about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the 2 books that are very kind of lowbrow. And I had very lowbrow followers.
I think they did pretty well. The one of them was on the Amazon bestsellers for Christmas. I remember.
Yeah, the first one did really well.
Yeah,
the second one, it did well.
It was called "I Like My Cheese" and other notes from the front line of flat sharing.
Yeah.
And
it's like 0.01p now on eBay.
But I remember one Christmas I was like going around to flatmate or friends that were at uni, and like I think I went to 2 different flat shares, and I saw that book that you made, and I was like, my cousin wrote that book, and it's like some random person that from the universe that's just found the thing that you've created in your mind and then put it out there. And
that was strange.
It's a strange experience.
No, I know, very strange. It's funny,
like,
my family, like my dad, I don't think he really registered that I was genuinely doing it. And I remember him calling and saying, I've just seen your book in Waterstones on the front table. And I was like, yeah, I know. And he's a bit like, oh my God. And he sort of like kept phoning me from different bookshops. I was like, Dad, I've written a book and it's in bookshops. It was like, you're going to keep seeing it? He sort of couldn't get his head around it. I think it was such an abstract concept that when it actually happened, he was like, oh, like that. And it was quite funny talking to people, because the idea of you being a character or people know you, I'm very kind of I said jack of all trades, but I'm quite extreme in like, I like very slapstick, lowbrow things. I like very high end. You know, I kind of, I probably quite like not being very identifiable, as we've discussed. And it was funny talking to people. Some people were really upset by me doing the book. It didn't sit well with them at all. You know, I was, you know, people who I was, you know, selling items to luxury companies that I designed, and then I was doing this book that was all about grossness and very silly. They were just not happy about it. People were really, really rude to me.
I think,
and I thought that was really interesting, that by association with me, they were really uncomfortable about it. You know,
people just want to put you into some sort of box, and
category.
and it's because I think it's because it's comfortable for them. And then, like, if they can go, okay, so you're doing that, or you're working on this, or you've got a career in this, or these types of things. And if they can categorize, then it's like, okay, well, I understand that, so I don't fear it. But then if you start telling people that you're doing something different from how they originally saw you, then they begin to kind of feel weird about it.
Well, people were very like, and also the humor was, and this was like 10 years ago, was perceived as really male. I think that's really funny and interesting, that it was gendered, and people were really surprised I was female. And that was quite interesting, and that's changed loads. Like, think about how many females you see on TV now that are comedians. A woman saying anything that was vaguely funny, wasn't all funny, sadly, not doing my own PR very well here, but anything that was funny was a bit laddish, but also kind of, you know, either seen as second rate, or, you know, that's not what a female did, very unattractive, you know, a seriously unattractive thing. And I found that really interesting. And
then it comes down to, like, that's just interesting, and it's interesting that you use that word rather than demoralizing or anything, because it's like, if it had really bothered you that was, because it can bother you, but then if you don't care too much about what validation from other people or what other people think of you, then it's like, oh, I'm just going on an exploration of the human condition and what people are like. And this is like, oh, I found out something new that I didn't know before. That's that's strange, and we should explore that in some way, but I'm not going to let it affect me.
I think I'm only like that because I've been through such terrible, such dark times in a way, and been so deeply insecure. In fact, I was talking about this with a friend. I had terrible panic attacks when I was younger, and then I was very ill, basically, in my teenage years. And then I moved to London, had an amazing, as I said, totally hedonistic time, but I completely lost the plot. I was essentially really unwell, very anxious, insecure person that, you know, it became like a real well-being issue. And at the same time, you know, I stopped drinking. I've had loads of therapy. I've had enormous amounts of therapy. And I suppose once you've kind of hit an absolute ultimate rock bottom, and I've had to analyze, you know, myself sort of totally, I see it as interesting, because to me it becomes a very clear behavior that it's an insecurity also in other people. You know, it's not really about, it's no longer about me. People essentially aren't that interested in each other, interested in themselves. You know, and as you said, it's what it's saying about them.
Because anytime anyone ever says anything negative to me or criticizing, or if I see them talking about other people, like, I'm not listening to the words that are coming out of their mouth in respect of me or the other person that they might be talking about. I'm just trying my best to look through them and the words that they're saying and thinking about how that reflects on their mindset about the world. And it's super hard to do because people like get their egos involved in getting offended by the things that people are saying to them, and then you end up like racking yourself with insecurity when somebody's just passed their own anxiety and angst onto you. So
it's quite funny though, because it can also swing into, you know, one of my favorite series is Mad Men, and also I love John Hamm, but that's a different thing. And there was a brilliant line in it where his character, this amazing sort of sophisticated, big shot, really handsome ad guy, is in the lift with this junior guy, and the junior guy's so pissed off with him, you know, about something, and he's like, and I think this about you, and I think this, and I can't believe you, blah, 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 blah. And then he just looks at him, and the doors of the lift open, he goes, that's really funny because I never think about you, and just walks out. And you're like, oh, killer line. You're like, what amazing line, you know. And in a way, it's that. It's like, yeah, why have you put so much energy into annihilating me? You know, why? What's going on there? And it just becomes really apparent, I guess.
It
And
reminds me of
it's
that.
as long as you're not a psychopath. That's what I'm saying. I mean, Don Draper is like a psycho in it. You know, if you're just walking around as a deluded kind of megalomaniac, Trump being a good example, where he's like, you're a disgrace and you're sad. You do have to at least
you have to
analyze
you have to sort of listen, but also be able to reflect on it yourself and just kind of step away, look at yourself in the mirror and think, does this person have a good point?
Yes,
like,
is there a truth in there?
Yeah, that I can act on, but not think about it that everyone that criticizes you is right.
Yeah.
But it kind of reminds me of that man in the arena quote, where it's like it's the man in the arena or woman in the arena that counts, because it's not the critic, because the person that's going through the struggles and, you know, picking themselves back up again when they've been beaten down and things, it's that person who should be applauded, even though, you know, the critic might be the loudest.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, putting yourself out there can be extremely painful, you know. I think we are in this really awful concentrated version of that with social media. I actually blame our press more than anything. I think we've got tawdry press. And even the news, I mean, the other day they said something on the news and I was like, that really isn't any kind of update on anything. You know, that's filling time. You know, that news has become an entertainment. I think that's put us in such a dangerous place. And the amount of kind of like communication we have about nothingness, you know, so like you say, sort of review, critique and debate on literally nothingness, you know, and that makes you so kind of obsessive. And it started with things like magazines when they used to do the sweat patches on, I still think I wish I kept them. You know, they do sweat patches on celebrities. And you were like, why is that a thing? You know, if that's a thing, you know, and it's like escalated from there, that minutiae that, you know, critiquing has gone sort of stratospheric.
Yeah, I think I remember we talked about the Steven Pinker's book Enlightenment Now.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and it's like people, like if you listen to the news every day, you would think that the world's falling apart. But like if the real story was told about progress that's happening in the world, the headline on the newspaper each day would have been like 250,000 less children died today than this time last year or something. I think that some number like that, and the amount of progress that we've made hasn't been reported because newspapers just sell, because they kind of make people afraid. And it's kind of, I struggle with this. There was that Catherine Graham was the editor on the Post, or the kind of owner of the Washington Post, but her husband was quoted with the quote that the news is like the first rough draft of history. But it's like, it's not really, because it's not actually telling the proper story. It's telling a kind of sorted version.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that will be interesting if we go back to hard copy press and journalists, because we've got so much deep fake news now, which is unbelievably scary. And there is a really weird psychology around it. It's like wanting to know about like murderers and things like that. It's almost like a morbid fascination, because you can then feel better about yourself. You're like, oh, well, at least I'm not that mad. You know, like I don't quite feel like chopping anybody up yet. And in a way, the news is a bit like that. And I think to sometimes feel relevant, there needs to be that energy and drama. You know, it's quite difficult to just be like, everything's okay, everything's fine, because then that feels like mundane. And in a way, it's that getting used to that mundane and average might actually be just totally great. You know,
or it's not meant to make people. It's like if you tear people down that are great, if you show horrible pictures of them on the beach or things like that, then there's some sort of, again, going back to the comparative thing with human beings, there's this aspect of it which like makes people feel better by tearing other people down, because then they can feel good about themselves.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah.
very weird. Again and again, it's like having a religion. It's like, we're gonna make these people our sort of gods and icons, and then when they show something human, we're gonna annihilate them for it. So I
Mhm,
mean, it's like time immemorial, people make religions for themselves. It's so weird. It's so
mhm,
surreal that we do
mhm,
it,
mhm.
and then we have a fit when they sweat. It's so strange, but it just seems to be a natural gut thing to do that always wondering about something that apparently is higher than us in a
Yeah.
way.
I guess we were talking earlier about why consumers buy stuff. So, and how it makes them feel about themselves. But how do you think about why do people make stuff? Why do people produce stuff? Like,
Oh, that's interesting.
what do you think about creativity, and why do people, do what they do and create
Do
what they
what they
create?
do. Yeah, that's really interesting because when I think about myself, so I've got two kids, and when I see them doing things, it's very funny because sometimes you'll really relate to stuff, and other times you're like, I don't
Mm,
get that. And one of my kids, I noticed, responds like I did. I always just kind of made things. Nobody asked me to. I would just start making things and give myself projects to do.
mhm,
So that was obviously a very cathartic thing to me, quite relaxing. And, I was good at it, so it was a way of almost like expressing myself. And my big sister, who's very creative, she said she would always end up drawing to explain something, sort of going,
mm,
look like this, you know. And it's funny because when I started my PhD, I was like, I can't remember how old I was. I was about 38 or something, and they screen you beforehand for loads of things. I think it's basically to see if you're going to get a computer or not, actually. But I came back dyslexic,
mm,
and I hadn't known that.
yeah,
When I was about 9, there'd been a discussion that I might be dyslexic. But they said, it was quite funny. They said like your visual ability, like problem solving and reasoning like that, is like, they use terms like superior. I think it's to make you feel okay. And then they were like, your audio is like sub something, sub something. And they were like, it's that discrepancy that makes you dyslexic. If
mm,
you're just sub on everything, you know,
uh-huh.
you're just sub. If you're superior on everything, yay, you're Stephen Hawking. But if
Yeah.
somewhere in it, so let's say everything's superior.
Mhm,
And then one thing's that discrepancy makes you dyslexic. So it can be very nuanced. It can be different. Because I was like, well, I can write. Um,
mm,
and anyone I told went, you're not dyslexic, you've written 2 books, you can write, you're doing a PhD. But
mm,
it was the audio. And what's interesting is she said at the end, but you're doing the right career. And it was like, well,
mm.
thanks for that. That's lucky. And it's funny that it just must have played out that I'm so visual and I'm so kind of tactile and tangible that I would literally make things to express myself. And that
Mhm,
actually, like years, decades later, there's almost like a description of me as a person, but through this weird test, this weird screening.
mm.
And I was like, and it's funny because they give you sort of day-to-day analysis of how that would play out. So they give you all the information. And then you're like, yeah, but what does that mean? How does that play out? And like they said things like you would find being on the phone and not seeing someone extremely difficult because you so read faces for
Right,
expression. And you
right.
probably misunderstand people a lot. Totally. I'm one of those
Uh-huh.
people who completely misses nuance points with people, and I would email or text or something. And they said, and also you would find large groups of people very difficult because there's so much to read visually, and also people lie. So if
Mhm.
somebody says to you, I feel amazing, I feel great, and their body language I'm reading is different, I'm really confused. Now, obviously, I don't go
Okay.
around doing it like that, but they
Yeah.
said it's like such a pounding of information. And so I was like, oh, I had loads of panic attacks when I was younger. And they said, yeah, you're probably immensely anxious because you're going into situations not knowing if you're going to be superior or sub, you know.
Mhm,
I went, oh, that's interesting because I'm also really interested in identity and fraudulent identity.
mhm.
And they were like, well, yeah, you probably felt quite fraudulent at times because if you said to somebody, I find this really hard making a phone call, they'll be like, what's you talking about? You've
Mm,
just written that or you've just done that.
mm.
So, you know, the create beat making can be tied up completely with your identity.
Yeah, and where you yeah, I think, yeah, on that fraudulent thing, a lot of people yeah, it's kind of like, do you ever prove yourself to yourself? Like, do you have get that validation enough to be like, I don't feel out of my depth in any or all situations, and even if I'm a beginner, it's okay because I'm just or if I'm not
Mm,
great at something, because I'm just enjoying it for doing it, just for
the
the
pleasure of it.
sake of just
That's quite hard, isn't it? For I'm over 40. For my 40th birthday, I asked for drum lessons because I was absolutely convinced I was going to be fucking amazing. I was like, I am going to be so good at this. And I went for the drum lesson. I was really cocky about it. I don't know why. I just was like, I just feel this is something I'm going to be great at. And I was utterly shite. And like really beyond shite, like, you know, losing a drumstick and things. And, you know, it was like I couldn't get into flow, you know, the idea of where you're just like in the zone. I just couldn't get into flow. And I was really like clenched. And then again, I'd get it. I'd be like, oh, got it. And as soon as I'd say got it, I'd like lose it again. He was like, you know, you've got to just like get into flow. I just couldn't do it. And it was funny because I was mortified by it. I actually felt really embarrassed about it. And I hadn't felt that level of sort of humiliation about learning something for a really long time.
Yeah.
And it was quite good because it made me quite empathetic to my students, because I teach loads of drawing. And drawing something you get really rusty at. So like, I wouldn't feel cool about drawing in front of my students right here, right now. You know, I'd have to go away. But it did make me much more kind of like how public and exposing it is. You know,
to practice in public,
and especially to come into a domain where your main thing is meant to be being creative, and then you're in a group of people that are all really creative, and you do a shitty drawing, you know. And I sort of had forgotten that sensation because I haven't been out of my comfort zone for so long. And I realized that actually, you know, it's kind of like a humiliation. Learning to be humiliated, I think, is really, really hard.
But it's probably
really good.
It's probably one of the things that can make you the most happy. Like because even I was learning, you know, I was learning to write software to build an application, and you know, I'd never done it before, and the process of just, you know, deciding I was going to do something completely new and completely different was amazing. And it's so exciting when you have to kind of go back to the start. It's like playing the drums. You have to learn the techniques. But the funny thing about drawing or any creative productive thing is that you learn the techniques first of all, and then you've got to both spend all of those hours learning all of the techniques and then throw them all out the window to allow your creativity to flow. So at the end of the day, because you get into that state of flow, so you stop thinking about the where your fingers are on the piano or that type of thing. You're just thinking about trying to create something that's a proper reflection of yourself.
Well, that's interesting. We teach the other way at St. Martin's. We teach back to front on purpose. So we don't pattern cut initially, and it does people's heads in. But we talk about, it sounds very pretentious, but it works. We talk about structures for your body, like don't talk about garments, because you can't help defaulting to thinking about jackets, tops, lapels, blah, 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 blah. And the thing is, you're just going to end up then making something, you know, that we've all seen and doesn't feel fresh or new. So we say, you know, we show them very basic things, but they're not pattern cutting at all. And we talk about draping and just using it and getting to feel the fabrics and get to know it and just almost trying it out. And it can look really dodgy, and people are like, what is that? It's just a big dodgy mess. But in a way, it's like, if you can get to that, you problem solve much better, way better. Because otherwise you just become obsessed with things like, well, that's not where the pocket will go. And you're like, stop talking about the pocket, you know? Like, don't worry about pockets, you know? So actually it makes you much more creative. And also, if you start something that's very ambitious and ambiguous and weird, you can probably pare it down into something much more wearable if you need to. But if you start with something very wearable at the beginning, you're not going to go anywhere particularly interesting. Do you know what I mean? So we don't teach them any skills actually initially, and people find it very frustrating. It makes them very, very angry. And in a way, you've got to break that kind of freeing yourself to make a mess, get it wrong, not understand, and just play is what we're trying to do. And it's, for us, it's a way of almost diagnosing who's going to be able to cope with what we're doing or not. Because if they just can't, it's really difficult. You can feel really clenched. It's very, very difficult and frustrating as well. They're like, just show me how to do it. And I'm like, I'm not going to show you because then it's my design. You know, it's like, you've got to try it, you know.
Like to have no structure.
No structure.
Like, that's a tough one. I was reading I was reading a book about how Leonardo da Vinci did his drawings, and he didn't. It's kind of with the clothing. You're trying to get them to avoid working from the outside in. He always worked from. That's why he was so big on like doing biopsies and things of human bodies, and he was
Yeah.
drawing all of the tendons in their body,
Yeah.
and he wanted to work from the bone to the muscle, then to the clothes that they wore, and then
Yeah, sort of out the way.
whereas a lot of painters would draw kind of from the skin in, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
really understand how the muscles would move with
Yeah,
one another.
exactly. Yeah, that's right. Because we talk about it has to work. Are you just putting something on a body, or are you working with a body? Because otherwise there's no point making it into a garment. It's not, there's no point having it as something that goes on a body if really the body is totally incidental. So what is it that's happening here? Or what are you trying to express with the body if you're trying to hide it or extend it or change it or warp it? What is it? What are you trying to do? Because actually fashion design isn't that far away from just art or sculptural work.
Exactly.
So you kind of have to decide what is it you're trying to say here. I mean, the one thing I like about design and fashion design is you can communicate loads of weird things to people whether they like it or not, because it can be transported and move around. I like that, and I like the immediacy that if everyone goes, we think that's rubbish and shite, you're like, fine. Whereas architects, it must do their blocking that they send years and years doing it, and then everyone's like, I don't like where you've put the disabled toilet. You're like, I like that. So,
and do you know the exciting thing is the market decides at the end of the day. It's like you could be, we talked about this as well, where you could be sitting having your own creative thought process about something that's going to be incredible, and everyone's going to love it, and it's going to be the best dress that's ever hit the market, and everyone's going to love it. But then you release it to the world, and then either nobody cares, or they laugh at it, or it's like you can make these things up in your mind, and it's trying to find the balance between what coming up with your own self-expression of what you think is going to be incredible versus deciding based on the feedback that you get back from the market. Finding
the
that midpoint is hard.
The market is a funny thing, because I've joked about this with friends. The thing that will sell will be the thing that people can almost deal with. So it's like tasting a new food. What is it they said? Kid has to eat it 30 times or something before you like it. I almost could guarantee if I went with a portfolio of work to a certain company, they would like the thing that I thought was the least interesting because it was palatable, so it depends on, what you're looking for. You're looking for mass consumption, are you looking for a niche area? I mean, in a way, my book was like that. I had a really frank conversation with my agent, where originally it was going to be more of an art book and just photographs of these notes. And he was like, look, it's a great idea. Your commentaries are funny. That's interesting. So do you want to make it an art book that sells to like 6 of your friends and stays in, a bookshop? Or do you want to sell loads of these and make money from it? And I was like, I want to sell loads of these and make money for it. And I was in a fortunate scenario where I felt very free to do it, because it was not what I was quote unquote trained in. I think if I'd been a writer, I wouldn't have been able to do it. If I'd done a degree in English literature, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But I was like, yay, I was trained as a fashion designer. So if everyone says this book's shit, it doesn't matter. And I was like, actually, I don't mind making something mass market. I'm not trying to appeal to 6 of my friends here. I am genuinely trying to make something that will, as you said, go to market. But doesn't always mean it's the best literature in the world or the best design in the world. And I mean, lots of times I think, well, the book's a good example. I mean, I did it. It took 5 years to get it to a publisher to do it. It got knocked back twice. And when they finally signed the deal, and I was really lucky, I got a massive deal on it, they said it's a great idea. And actually, it was the one time I remember being like that, finding it quite irritating that, my creativity was dictated by somebody else. I went, it was a great idea 5 years ago. I was like, you just didn't bite, I had to wait for about 3 similar things to go to market before the publishers were like, okay, that's a good idea. You're like, you should have gone first time. So sometimes that can be just
it's
building
timing
up
as well.
And or your established name that they trust it. They don't even know what you're going to do, but they'll just like go for it, sort of thing. And I was like a nobody, but I'm quite good, I think, in judgment of what is a good idea. In certain realms.
But then they're not always mutually exclusive. Like you can create something that is of a huge amount of value to and people love incredibly. And that doesn't mean that it's just going to be a small amount of people. You can also, it's like a graph. It's like amount of value, amount of people, and it's like area under the curve.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much value can you create for the most number of people?
Yeah.
But like, that's just the sweet spot, and it's so hard to figure out. Harry Potter might be an example of that, or
Yeah.
like things that are just so well loved and get into the zeitgeist. But it's funny because you can't really plan that. That's the weird thing about it.
No. Yeah.
You don't even know it's going to happen before it happens, and you might have an inkling, but you often people try and like put a bit of this that they've seen and a bit of that, and they try to like come up with some system that will allow them to create something that's going to have mass appeal.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really work like that.
See, in fashion, it's very interesting because there are very clear kind of tipping points, if I quote Malcolm Gladwell, where it will strike fear in the heart of certain designers if, it gets to the point where a certain person wants to wear their stuff. You're like, oh my God, we've gone too far, one way. And fashion's very like that. Whereas your J.K. Rowling example is interesting because it's like they become, as you said, part of the zeitgeist and quite sentimental about it. Fashion people aren't really like that, or it will take decades before they're sentimental. It's a faux pas. It's seen as it's the ultimate shallow design in that, that's not, you don't look sentimental or nostalgic, you just look out of date, so fashion's quite different in that sense. But it's interesting you saying that, because things like actors become national treasures, we sort of grow to love them, and even though they're prolific, because I think actors are a really weird concept, that we go and see the same person doing different things when there's loads of people who could be in it. It's kind of weird that we want to see their familiar face but in a different way. We like that kind of aspect of it. It's like, oh, there's so but they've put on £5, and they're really angry when we know they're really happy. That's quite a weird concept that we want to keep them.
What is it about Tom Hanks that people just,
that's right, like,
it's like,
what is it?
What is it about him as a person?
That's right. Why are we okay? And then why is it certain things we want to smash down? We build up and then we really want to take them apart. It's like, okay, that's enough. You've been far too successful. We want to see you demise. I mean, at one stage I was like, I feel like, the press hounds certain people, they're just desperate to see that person, destroyed. And that's why I said, I think one of my biggest issues is our press, because, they're the ones that really, you can do it with people, and actually products, they can do it with products as well. They can sort of annihilate things, make it cheesy, make it naff, when actually it's not, I don't
know that people, maybe it's just I'm not, but I think a lot of people are consuming things more socially now. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time reading Daily Mail or other kind of media outlets. Maybe I watch like normal news on, Good Morning Britain or whatnot. I'm embarrassing myself now, but but like, people kind of consume what their friends are showing them a lot more, and usually that's not like, I think maybe in the 90s, like in the last decade maybe.
But do you not get tons of clickbait? I'm always getting stories about people that I'm like, why am I being told about this person? I get loads of stuff.
That's funny.
I think it's to do with what spam you're getting. I get tons of it. I bet it's because I'm female. I bet there's absolutely tons. There's loads of stuff like that. In fact, that'd be a really interesting study to see what clickbait different people were getting. Because I've had really funny conversations with people who, you get the same one. You're like, that's really weird. I had that thing, why is people trying to sell me that thing? Or I keep hearing that story about that person. You're like, why do I keep hearing about that person? And I must be in some demographic,
And what control do you have over, your own thoughts in a way? Because because if you're constantly being fed these stories or paradigms of the way that the world is, or what you should think about certain things, then it's trying to like cut through all of that noise and actually think, what do I actually think about this, and why am I even thinking about this in the first place? Like, am I being distracted from a whole load of other things that I should be thinking about? Like, what's even going on here? But
isn't that what Putin does? He just puts out totally random stuff all the time to society. So they're just completely like all over the show. It's like having a moving target. You can't really kind of focus on it.
But then again, I don't think it's necessarily the case in the UK. Maybe, I mean, a lot of people would say the media outlets are in cahoots with the government, and it's all big corporate media interests that are kind of feeding a narrative. But I feel like in the UK, more than other countries, there's probably more like media outlets kind of challenging the government a bit more than in other countries. And also, I don't know that.
Though I think our perception of us as British people is confused for sure. Because what's really funny is I teach students from like Korea, China, whatever, and look at South Korea. They nailed looking after this virus situation, and China actually in a way did as well. You know, okay, the first bit wasn't so good, but what's funny is when it started kicking off here, loads of our Chinese students were going back to China, and we were like really confused. We're like, why would you want to go back to China? It's carnage there, you know. And they were like, well, the perception of Britain is that you're making a complete mess of this, and actually we're beginning to get a hold on it. And it was funny because I was like, really? Oh, I thought we got this, you know, British, we managed to get this, you know, we're very, you know, first world, you know, Western, surely we've got this sussed, you know. And I was a bit like, oh, like that. And it was like, oh no, you know, we're seen as actually, you know, slightly archaic, you know.
I think there's actually there's also some, I don't know, like democracy is a religion. You know, sovereign nation states are almost a religion, but in some ways, like, you know, China being an authoritarian state with you know, control of the press and things, and being able to like force people to go into lockdown allows them to better plan for these types of events and deal with them when they come along. And also, but like I was thinking about democracy as a concept and rotating the governments that come in every 4 years. And although it's incredible because it makes people feel like they have some form of dominion over the country, it also stops like long-term planning for anything, because there's constantly people going off in different directions. And if you ever want to get anything done, it always takes longer than 5 years, especially for like a massive country. So it's like, it's a massive challenge that we're screwing ourselves over in some ways by having democracy. And then with the nation state thing, I struggle with that as well, because at one side of things, it's like awesome because you can have a democratic rule of a government of a certain group of people, but at the same side of things, it's very tribalistic because it's us against them. It's like our country's the best. So whereas I always feel like one world, I'm a member of the human race, don't identify with, you know, these stories that have been created over years in nation states, which have been just built up because people have wanted to acquire power. So it's it's always a bit of a conflict in my mind where there are lots of advantages from it, but people don't think about the downsides.
Well, that's the thing, isn't there? There's going to have to be something other that we don't quite know what that is yet. I mean, democracy can't work if we don't have trusted information. You know, all the voting that's happened recently, you know, we know it's become sort of popularity contests, or the idea that people might be boring. I always thought that was really interesting about people voting because they seemed really boring. You were like, I didn't know they had to be, you know, Mr. Charisma. I just want them to be really good at maths, to be honest. You know, until we get that bit sorted out, then democracy has gone a bit all over the show.
But that's just part of human nature, isn't it? To like go for the popular kid in school.
Yeah,
you know?
It is. But in the past, it would have been your local yokel in the village. Do you know what I mean? But the problem is, as you said, we're now a global society. That impact is absolutely enormous. Again, Trump being, you know, the what was the show? The Apprentice, wasn't it? The version of it there. You know, the fact that people kind of liked the idea he was this big shot, and anyone who grew up in New York with Trump around knew he kind of was actually this really flaky businessman that, you know, his dad has helped out. So everybody else was like, that's hilarious. But actually, the power of that program was people were like, yeah, he's this really big entrepreneurial guy, he's amazing. And it was like, oh my God, people have actually bought into this.
It's also people buy into fear that things aren't going, and they also don't buy in. They buy into hoaxes. They buy into, people telling. They don't think about data and statistics and reason and rationality and thinking things through from first principles and that type of thing. People just get told something over and over and over again, and then begin to believe it is actually the case.
Have you seen that thing? I obviously it's obligatory to talk about Netflix at some stage while you're in quarantine. There's a thing called 100 Humans.
Quarantine, is that what? Wow,
that's like somebody once asked me where Son Sarib was, and I was like, Sainsbury's. I was like, Sainsbury's. Quarantine, lockdown. I saw this program, and it was really funny because one of the things we were looking at, it was like human behavior, but they were saying that does the way somebody's attractiveness look affect, how much of an effect is it? And they did this amazing study where they showed a group of people a photo of somebody and said what crime they committed and like what sentence you would give within these kind of parameters. And then they would give a picture of somebody who was attractive with the same one to a different group. It was insane, the difference. Like we're talking the one that was seen as quote unquote less attractive, life for things, and the one who was like attractive, saying things like, well, they've got to live with that knowledge for the rest of their life about murdering that person, totally much more sympathetic and kind to the good looking person, like totally different. And I mean, that is sadly, that seems to be human behavior.
That's similar to the study with the man and the woman in a boss position, where they would give a Jane and a John, and they would describe Jane or John, who was the manager in a department, and John would be described as a great leader, and Jane would be seen as demanding and overbearing. But it was the exact same description that was used, and so people come at everything with their preconceptions of what they think people should act like.
Well, it's like me saying a certain type of humor was seen as male. And I think it's because it's seen as a challenging, woman is meant to be a much more passive figure. And I sort of understand that in the sort of biology of it. If we were sort of like still kind of just working on an animal biological level, having a feisty female within that interaction is probably tiresome. So a passive, submissive woman, is going to be apparently what female is if we're talking totally on biology. But I mean, we're not. But it is interesting that people kind of need these stereotypes sometimes, or they feel really kind of
lost. It's like putting people in their boxes as well. People want to understand things, and they want to define them in certain ways. There's have you read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman?
I know it.
It's a great one. He basically goes into the fact that we think that we're rational beings, and all of our decisions are based on reason, data, all of this type of thing. But actually, we're tricking our rational brain is actually being tricked by like an animal brain, and the animal brain is basically in control and making all of the decisions, but then feeding that information to the rational brain, which overlays it with some rational justification for the reason that we made the decision, and then we end up making an animalistic decision, but thinking that we've fully reasoned it out.
It is quite funny because you'll see certain things in play, and I mean the only bias I would probably ever get in my life is that I'm female, and I'm aware that I have lots of privileges because of that. But one time I went to one of my kids' parents' evening, and I went in with Mark, my husband, who's a man. And when I came in, the teacher, who is another man, got up and shook his hand and sort of went like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" to Mark. And he sat down and started. And it was really funny. He'd just totally forgotten to speak to me. He was like so in the zone, and I was a bit like, "And hi, I am here too." And he was really embarrassed that he realized what he'd done, but I could see he was quite stressed and he was in the zone, but I could almost see he was just thinking, the man. And I was like, I'm the woman. And I was a bit like he looked really embarrassed. And I was like, it's okay, it's all right, you know, there's two
Yeah.
of us, you know, you had to make a decision somewhere in your animal brain, you made the decision to talk to the man, you know. I was like, it's okay, you know, it's
Yeah.
fine. But it was really interesting to see it. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm here. And it was funny because I was left hanging, you know, I was like,
Oh, wow.
you know, I was like, oh, that's weird, you know. And he was like, oh, he was really mortified because his animal brain had totally gone
Yeah.
in the way. But
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, but how much do we use it as an excuse? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the difficult bit. You know, people just saying, "Hey, I just, you know, it's just
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z."
I was actually in I went to like this church in not super religious, but I went to this church kind of concert thing when I was living in New York, and basically there was a there was a preacher, and he started talking um about white privilege,
Mm,
and he basically um made the point, you know, it's not that confusing as a concept. It's that, you know, if you know, and he got two of the people that were part of the congregation to stand up. One was a black guy, one was a white guy, and he said it's simple. When, you know, John, the black guy, walks into a room, he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, and he has to prove himself. And when,
yeah,
you know, Jim, the white guy, walks into the room, then he gets the benefit of the doubt, and then he needs to lose that kind of goodwill type thing.
yeah,
And it's and a lot of that is like being built into people's psyche for a long, over generations and things, because of historical legacy of you know, racism and things. And then but people feel uncomfortable about that as a concept, and even kind of talking about it feels
yeah,
weird for people.
yeah. And
um,
also, then people overcompensate and make it worse.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we
yeah.
have lots of outreach programs, and I was in one meeting where they were talking about questions you could ask people, and you had to be careful, you know, they're not divisive, or, you know, people are at a disadvantage. And there was a really long discussion about saying to somebody, what exhibitions have you been to? And it was quite interesting because there was a discussion that culturally, in some cultures, um, the idea of going to an exhibition is just not, you know, part of it. It's
Mhm,
not like people are. It's just not. It's quite a Western thing, you
mhm,
know. And so if you are a family that maybe are second generation here, that doesn't mean you're not amazingly creative. It's just not a thing that maybe you do.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so we were talking about things like that, but it became a really funny conversation because then somebody said, and it was an overcompensation. They were then saying that, you know, you had to be, basically what they were saying was like you would probably be richer, you'd be middle class or something to go to an
Mm, mm,
exhibition or
mm.
a gallery. And I was beginning to be a bit like, you know, I
This doesn't
don't know if
feel
that's totally
quite
true.
right. Yeah.
And then she said, I mean, like, she's like I go to the north, you know, and there are people who've never been to exhibitions there. And I was like, oh,
Okay.
well, right back there, right back there. I was like, I'm really north because I'm Scottish.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I've been to an exhibition. I was
yeah.
like, now you're making a mega
I know.
generalization.
It's like, yeah,
You're
people
like,
have these
what?
prejudices in all different ways, like
Yeah,
against women, and then against people of different cultures and people from different countries and like there's so many like mixed different shapes and sizes of it, and you can be at different juxtapositions of it.
yeah,
And it kind of just comes back to their people's insecurities and fear at the end of the
mm,
day. Like it's
mm,
again a reflection of, you know, oh, I don't know people from the north, and they're probably all, you know, you're making a they're making a generalization, but it's because it's the fear of the unknown
yeah.
that
I
they don't
do
feel comfortable
notice,
with.
with an older generation, older than me, you know, we have loads of people who are sort of non-binary, maybe transgender, and don't really want to talk about it, basically. And it is funny when I'm ever with people with an older generation, they're really fixated about that. They think the world's gone to complete shit because
Mm,
of. And I said, look, you know, I really honestly don't think loads of people are going to change their sex, you know, their sex. It's a big deal to do that, you know, suddenly
mhm,
taking hormones and basically, you know, totally changing your genitals. I was
mhm,
like, and also it's probably going to be the same percentage that were in historically utterly miserable because they
mhm.
had to just sort of pretend. So it's like, so what does it really matter? You
Yeah,
know, it's like it seems to be such a massive stress. Like we're really gonna fall apart. It's like the Roman Empire. It's like this is it. You know, It's the world's gone completely mad. You were like, it's not really, has it? You're like, it's not like prolifically happening. So who cares?
Well, on
like,
that one,
who cares?
on that one, people just are. People just, if I say you're a woman and I'm a man, and we both agree with that as a concept, then somebody saying that there is no gender or definition of a man, or specifically like it's not binary like that, and you can have you can be part man, part woman, you're on a scale, that can be pretty disconcerting for people because it challenges who they think that they are in a way.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why they feel uncomfortable. I'm not
Yeah.
agreeing with that as a concept, but I'm just saying that that's probably why the fear comes in, because people go, well, you can't tell me that I'm not a man. That's where the fear comes from.
Yeah, I can understand that it's the rules, like you said. It's like what it's funny because it's more what is man, actually. You don't often hear women saying, I feel really challenged about being a woman. It's quite often about being a man and emasculated that comes up. I mean, I work with lots of people who are, would identify with they, that's the pronoun they use.
Yeah.
And I couldn't care less, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only interested if I wanted to have a relationship with them, because I mean, if because we need to establish what that relationship would be. But otherwise, I genuinely couldn't care less. And I'm not bothered. I would only be bothered if I got something wrong. And in that sense, the only time I've ever got pissed off is if you get something wrong and then they are offended. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you look very much like a certain gender. And I have got that wrong. Now I know that you don't want to identify, you're this. I've got that. But you can't take umbrage with me over that. That's not fair. I'm trying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not going to pretend that I haven't noticed that, like, you're 7'4", and wearing what I would identify as female clothes, But if you want to be they, I am fine with that. But I think then taking offense if I get it wrong, you're like, I'm just trying. I think that's it. Once we all get used to stuff,
I think it's
then
just
it'll be much easier.
Yeah, and it's like anything, things just take a little bit of time for people to kind of adopt the new, new kind of cultural changes. I mean, like, societies have gone through so many of these. Like, I reckon when I was a kid, it was being gay. Like, you would hear that as a insult in the playground. So many times people would go, "You're gay." But like now, I would just never that would just sound so foreign as a thing to say to somebody.
But I suppose your virility and your kind of sexuality will always be an insecurity until adulthood, I think, because that's such a maturity. And because I've had this conversation, I've obviously got 2 sons, and somebody said to me that they'd heard they have older boys and somebody saying, oh, you're gay, and it was like like that. Again, that takes a massive strength of character to be like, I am. But I think you're right. I think we're getting there, and I think I spend a lot of time with men that have gone through horrible lives, really, until they come to art school where nobody's bothered. And it's quite common that people come out when they get there. Quite often they've come from also cultures that won't accept it. And it just seems such a waste of their lives and time, that they've been so unhappy. And then they'll tell you, and it's such an enormous thing to them. And of course we're like, I don't mind this. But it's difficult because they might go back to a culture where it's still not accepted, but it just seems such a waste of time. I'm like, I'm not interested in anybody else unless they're interested in me. I'm like, really, that's all it comes down to.
But people want to feel like they belong, like they're accepted by their peers, and it comes back to one of the things about comparing yourself to others and feeling kind of a sense of that you've been just accepted by the world at large, versus being self-reflective and thinking, being able to just be completely comfortable with who you are. But it takes a long time to get to that point.
I think I got to a lot of points, as I said, I hit a rock bottom, but also
Yeah.
having children where you suddenly realize you're in sort of survival mode.
Hmm.
You know, so many things you're like, I actually don't really care about this. I've just got to do X, Y, and Z. And I remember sort of thinking before I had children, thinking, my God, you know, why are those people not bothered that they don't know anything about music? They look really bad. They're wearing an amazing jean that I wouldn't wear. You know, it's like, why is that? And in a way, you know, children's good on that sense. It was like, just don't give, you know, too many fucks about that. You know, I've just got to keep two people alive
Hmm.
and hopefully well, you
Hmm.
know, and hopefully do a good job of introducing them to, you know, what it means to be a human, you know, nowadays.
Yeah, and being just like growing up and being kind to people,
Yeah,
empathetic, caring
yeah,
about what other people like feel. Like these are the types of things that you need to kind of teach people are the more valuable things than tearing other people down and trying to make yourself look good
yeah,
just in comparison.
yeah. Or at least, you know, remember a lot of it's fantasy and there's nothing wrong with fantasy. You know, if it gets you through reality, that's fine. But to remember it is fantasy. I mean, that's what fashion is. It's fantasy, you know.
Mhm.
Don't get too wrapped up in it.
Well, everything
Um,
is at the end of the day. We're all, I guess,
yeah.
we're all. I love this Jim Carrey quote where he said, "I used to feel like I was a man experiencing the universe, and now I feel like the universe experiencing a man." It's
Oh,
like, and it's like you're kind of everything in outside of you, even your thoughts and your emotions. You're experiencing all of these things, but it's your own reality. You can make it however you want it to be, type of thing.
that's like I nearly killed the kids' brains by we talked about the concept of time, and I was saying that for ages in France they didn't have the weekend. That was like a British thing, you know, and
Yeah.
it was seen as a sort of British thing that was introduced, you know, the Le Weekend, and they were just like, boom. And I was like, they were like, they actually changed the days. I was like, well, days are kind of not real, are they?
Do you
You
know
know, and they were like,
that? Do you know what that is the mind blowing moment for me? Like, do you know? I think I was living in this world for about the first 25 years of my life or longer, where I just thought that the world was there to be lived in. Like
right.
you were born, and then the world was almost static versus you could change it and you could
Mm.
make something that other people could experience themselves,
Yeah.
and you can make a dent on the universe in some big or small way, but people think that that they forget that everything that's been created, days of the week, clothes that you're wearing, the jewelry, the books,
Mm.
the computer that I'm sitting on talking to you, all of it has been created by somebody in the past who's just had an idea for something that might be useful for people,
Yeah.
and they've come along and thought, I'm going to create this thing and make things better for people. And so you're almost like constantly dipping into that wealth of human endeavor or human kind of ingenuity that's
Yeah.
been kind of built up foundational layers over many many generations. And
Yeah.
I almost like, as soon as you realize that you almost start to feel a bit like bad that you're not contributing something back into this wealth or pool of creativity. And
But
then that's
do you not think that in a way is the human condition, is to suddenly realize that everything is malleable, including your own mind? You know, once you realize it's not static actually. And I think that was the thing that I completely sort of fell apart over, was I felt like something had gone wrong with my mind. And in a way it was like an over analysis of everything, and such anxiety and such a confusion over who I was. Lots of things happened in my life sort of simultaneously that made me feel as though I no longer knew who I was.
mm,
And so I no longer felt as though that thing that felt permanent in my mind was no longer it was almost like somebody telling me, you know, like if we talk about our last conversation, you are a middle-aged man. You know, it was like I was like, I'm so confused now as to where I am. And in a way, once I think you know that you're actually very malleable, not only do you sort of respect your own and maintain and look after your own mind,
mhm,
as you said, it means you can completely start analyzing and looking at things in a much more kind of philosophical way, which I think is really,
mhm,
really good. And I always say the saddest thing about humans is we're only generational. It's like we're not we don't quite learn. It's like as soon as we learn, we die out and another one does it. You know, it's like, oh, bloody hell, they're doing the thing they did before.
Well, you do and you don't. And also, it might be the only reason that we create things. I mean, I was asking before about why do you think people are productive? Why do you think people create? And a part of that is like, you know, people are going to die. Like everyone is going to expire at some point and be replaced by a new model that comes along with probably better ethical values than the previous generation and make things slightly kind of improved in some way. But the thing about the fact that you're going to die is that you want to use your time to the most advantage as possible so that you can, it's like kind of an ego driven thing where you want to leave something that lasts after you die, like a legacy of some form. And I think a lot of the active creation or the active expression comes down to people wanting to like build a company so it lasts after they disappear, and they can embed their values or what they care about or what's important to them into something that's external to them.
I think it can be, but sometimes I think it just feels like you need to get it out of your head.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a thing that needs to exist.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've always created because I just really, really wanted to. And I was not really interested in the impact became insignificant to me.
Yeah.
And like, in a way, legacy feels to me as quite a young thing, and I feel older. And in a way, I feel like I'm much more of a transient thing. I feel less worried about the idea of dying and that's it. It's sort of like over. Maybe it's because I've had to talk about it so much with kids. Like they're totally obsessed with it. They're like, when are you going to die? Are you going to die? Are you dying? Are you dead? You know, and you're like, oh my God, like every day you're like, okay, they're very, you know, they're very scared of that concept. And actually after a while I was like, there's nothing really to be scared about.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like when you go to bed and fall asleep where everything disappears.
Yeah.
You're not scared. You know, it was like, you know, it's how, I'm not going to say to them, it's how you die, you know, if it's painful. But actually, you know, I don't know. Have you ever had any near-death experiences? Has anything happened to you? You've nearly died?
I got hit by a taxi once and I went rolling up the bonnet and I smashed the windscreen.
Oh my God, that's pretty bad.
And then I came flying down off it. But like for some reason I'd like must have like leapt at the right time or something, but I wasn't really injured. I was just shocked badly. But I remember thinking after that was a seriously hairy moment. That could have turned out a lot worse.
But in the moment of being hit, you didn't have a thought. You didn't think I'm going to die.
I think I thought I was in trouble for smashing a windscreen, to be fair.
Really? Okay. That's
yeah, it was a weird one.
Yeah, because I've twice thought I was definitely dying. So one time I had a problem with my back, and it's a really obscure thing, but it means that you get like a paralysis, and I couldn't walk properly for a month. And it's to do with the fluid around your brain leaking. It's really gross.
Right.
It's like if you have a spinal tap where they drain it. So something in my back leaked. They don't know why. But I thought I was having a stroke. And I remember I'd woken up with an absolute agony headache. And I sort of literally shuffled to work. And as I got to King's Cross up the escalator, I was literally like, my head feels like it's going to explode. I started throwing up. I was like totally like Alien or Omen. I was like, yeah, like that. And I remember thinking my head definitely feels like it's going to explode. And I was like, fuck, maybe my head is exploding. You know, it's like, maybe, fuck, this is it. And it's like, I'm going to die here. Because it suddenly was like a pain I never felt. And it was so bad. I was like, fuck, I'm going to die at King's Cross puking. And people were like really alarmed and scared. And they definitely thought like I was a junkie or something. And I did have a thought of, fuck, the last thing of me is going to be really shit. But I was quite young then when I had that. And then I nearly died having my first kid. And the pain was so bad. I remember thinking afterwards that I'd lived. And they were all like, it's amazing you live, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, the pain was so unbelievably bad. You know, if you just shot me in the head, I'd have been cool with it. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what pain's for. You know, it's so you can't actually care. No, you can't reflect. You can't reflect on actually I'm gonna die. You're just like, I'm just in so much ragged pain. You know, you could fucking kill me right now, and I'm in. And I am dead. You know,
dead. But you don't know you're dead. That's the thing.
Well, that's what I thought. Pain maybe is for that reason, to stop you being able to go, oh. That's the bit you worry about, is the
Yeah.
thought process beforehand,
Yeah.
Um,
A little bit of it does feel slightly empty in the sense that, um, people believe in God because they want to believe that they're going to live in heaven or hell, but they believe in something in the afterlife. People
yeah,
want to believe that something happens afterwards because they
yeah,
feel like that can't be the end. I kind of don't actually feel that bad about the concept of like dying one day, because I think, hopefully 100 good years would be awesome, and try to, even something like this would last probably after, I die one day, and
yeah.
maybe somebody will listen to it, and so
Your
there's
your back for life's gonna outlive you.
yeah, exactly. But then I get kind of just like happiness from the fact that, well, there are going to be other humans that are
Yeah,
alive, and there is consciousness, I guess. And if you believe that people are like, there's a oneness between people, and we're not just all individuals going on our own journeys, and we're selfish and things, and we actually care about one another, and there's a sort of common united force between
yeah.
people,
Well, I
then
think I think that's what through the ages religion has been trying to say through storytelling analogy, is that when they say love is everything, it's like, well, actually, if everybody got to this sort of nirvana state en masse, that would be heavenly. That would be a sort of an ultimate. So in a way, it was like an attempt to say, if everyone could just be really great, would really help. But it's funny, I don't even worry about. I again, because I probably had to talk about it a lot with kids, the idea of being granular, like I've said to them, well, you just become like mulch. You just kind of turn into soil. It's a bit grossy for a bit, and then you become
uh-huh.
beautiful compost. And I was
then
saying, and
then a
then
worm eats
that's a
you, and then
worm, yeah. And I
something
was like,
eats the
that's
worm.
right. And then you become a cheetah like you want to. And I'm a bit like, I quite like that idea of being granular. Like I just become part of a massive ecosystem.
Of
I
energy.
I yeah, I quite like that. That I had a finite period, a bit like a battery.
Mhm.
It's quite satisfying when you take a battery out of something and put in a fresh one. I kind of feel a bit like that. Like I'll give it a go, I'll try my hardest,
Yeah.
and fine, because actually nothing does really last. Somebody 70 or 80 years ago, we don't really know about them. We
Yeah.
might, but we might not. So I
Yeah.
don't really worry about it too much. I do worry about the here and now, and I know I'm interested in the idea of, like I said, making people feel happy or okay. That's become a much more, rather than making them want and desire in a more sort of cynical way.
Mhm,
I was like,
mhm.
I like the idea of that I can bring something to people that feels good. And I know that sounds very Mother Teresa-y, but I think the idea of having a negative impact now, again, especially with children, where they feel like your raw heart sitting out. And if anyone says anything to your kids, you're like, oh my God, it's like that. In a way, that kind of pain, I hate that idea, So I listened to, I don't know if you listen to Adam Buxton podcast, but he's
I've
really
not heard it.
funny.
You mentioned him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really good. That idea of, there was a guy that he thought was a wanker, and they had a bicker, and in the end he sort of backed down and was like, okay, I'll take, like, I'll take on board your your wanky comment. It's like, oh cool. In a way it's like, I'll be a better person if now and again I can just, endure those things,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
and maybe then I can put it back as a better thing. It is like, can I pass on a legacy of
It's some
non-toxic rather than
Yeah,
toxic?
yeah, kind of the interactions that I have, and the human lives that I contribute to be made better as a result. And like, often people used to kind of create things because it would be like, oh, I want to play on people's desires, but it's your intention always comes out in the end. And if your intention was to make somebody get a short-term hit of dopamine because they would buy something that would make them feel good but then insecure about themselves, and you knew
Mm.
that when you were making it,
Yeah,
then
you don't feel.
there's no karma, there's no positive karma effect on you, other than the money that you're probably going to earn for it, but you might not feel great about it in a way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I realized I was really interested in that, the manipulation. And I think I realized I liked the power of it, but actually that waned. It was like once that had happened, I'd done that a few times. It was like, I don't actually if I feel very good about that. At first it's really exciting and alluring for people to want things that you've done. And I hadn't always, like I said, I hadn't made for that reason. It'd been sort of pitched to me like people might want the things you do. Great. And then of course that's really, really addictive. But then after a while I was like, you know what, I don't know if I'm enjoying that. If I'm going to do that, I want it to be at least something that is beneficial and not just, as you said, playing on their deep, deep insecurities. Because I think I've been so insecure, and everybody's insecure. I still obviously have times when I'm insecure, but I think I've been I'm always very open with people about, how I've been, my past, my present, whatever, because I think it's all round much better,
Yeah.
And
You're
if
not
somebody,
hiding anything.
No.
People spend so much time being afraid of what people are going to think of them if they expose themselves, but you just spend all your time and energy thinking about trying to wear a mask, and then nobody really trusts you because they don't feel like you're being authentic anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well just be honest.
Yeah, and also if somebody doesn't like you or wants to have a massive go at you and can be bothered with, fine, whatever sort of thing, or that they've never had any issue in their life, fine, great, that's fine. I'm not interested in annihilating other people, and I think that is now such a common feature in life. But as I said, it'll take quite a lot for people to wean themselves away from putting out those kind of perceptions into the world.
That was actually one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this, because I like these kind of I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I like long form conversations where you get to explore like topics with people that actually have substance and you can kind of explore the human condition and why we feel how we feel and why we do what we do. And you can't really explore that in a social media interaction. So you end up, somebody puts a post that they want to feel good about themselves, then you like it, and then you leave a comment and they like your comment, and it's just this vacuous cycle of inanity that just you get caught trapped up in. And if you're getting your validation from that type of thing, then it's just, you need another dopamine hit constantly. It's like a drip. It's like so you're addicted. And I hate getting caught up in that cycle, and I don't really kind of gravitate towards it naturally. So I just wanted to do something like this because it just allows me to create content that might be kind of interesting to people, but also allows me to actually kind of have conversations with people that are,
genuine,
inspiring or genuine, that you can actually go a level deeper.
Well, I always say everybody should have therapy. I mean, I'm like, I genuinely don't understand why people aren't given hardcore therapy at school. Why is it like really important things like why is puberty, puberty is like one of the most painful things for a lot of people. It's confusing, they don't know what the hell's going on, and you have like maybe a biology teacher talking a bit about it, or a little bit about body odor, and it's like, that's ridiculous. I mean, actually parenting's exactly the same. It's like, why are you allowed to be let loose with people, and give them all sorts of crazy messed up why aren't there more lessons, in these kind of things, and it's a lot of it people don't want to say, I can't do it, I don't understand, I'm really scared. I mean, I wish when I was younger I'd been able to have way more of those conversations where I'd be like, for some reason I don't feel happy at the moment and I don't understand it, because I think that would have probably nailed a lot of things in my life much sooner, rather than sort of thinking I was doing something that seemed really obscure. It's like, am I thinking in a wrong way? And it's like, I'm just thinking in a specific way,
and you're just not the same as everyone else, and that's okay.
Or I'm actually the same as a lot of people, but nobody said anything.
Yeah.
And actually I'm doing something that is totally the average thing to do, or as you said, maybe it's really abnormal and I should be medicated and I don't know. I mean, that's what's so awful about it, is people if you're schizophrenic and you need to have some, medication, then you should. It's not fair to leave people and just be like, oh, I'm sure you can sort of get over it.
Yeah.
So I really believe in it. And funnily enough, the foundation, we talk about being like therapy, because as I said, it can be really humiliating. You can feel really raw. You're away from home for the first time. You're with a bunch of people who don't know you. Think what it's like at 19, and you're suddenly with like 50 people from all over the world. How many hang-ups, ego trips, confusions there are. So it's a really hardcore year.
Yeah.
And the students come out as amazing students, because quite often they have to go through very hardcore things.
Yeah.
But as a result, they're brilliant. They're really durable. They're much more durable than I think a lot of people give credit to. A lot of like teens, they're put under a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
from
You do need that
society.
mirror. Yeah, it's like you do need that mirror to talk things out. You don't want to talk about things like these negative reinforcing things that create
Yeah,
loops in your mind that reinforce the negativity that you have, but you need somebody to pump you full of positivity, or like give you reasons to be optimistic about why the world is awesome, when your mind continuously rotates around some spiral of negativity.
or to understand why you process things that are sort of, let's call them neutral, as negative.
Mhm.
Why are you processing it like that? It's like that one, so and so made me so angry, and you're like, what were you? Why did you get angry? Why didn't you get upset, or why didn't you laugh, or it's like nobody made you,
They
and it's
said
like,
that. They said that. That's what it is. It's the separation
yeah,
between like responsibility and accountability, where the person is responsible for saying the thing that they said, but you're accountable for how you feel about it,
that's right,
and you
how
can
it
separate the
impacts
two
you.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I found through teaching that's been really interesting. And also, I became a manager when I didn't want to, and that was really interesting. I remember once having a really, really difficult time with a member of staff, and it got really bad. And one of the things was, this person said that I continuously referred to myself as a manager. And that really pissed them off. They thought it was me going on about my hierarchy. And it was really funny, because I'd been told by my boss to always start a conversation with, as your manager, so that they didn't think it was like a personal vendetta.
Right.
And so
Okay.
we had this crazy scenario where she just thought I was being a total cock, like continuously talking about my sort of status.
Uh-huh.
Whereas I thought I was being really kind of like open and empathetic, and trying to show that this was very much about that, in the job role, and it wasn't about the person. And it was really funny. It was like such a miscommunication,
Yeah.
so that's why it's much better to say, like, why did you say that? That was really hurtful. I
Uh-huh.
feel really hurt by that. Did you mean to
Yeah.
hurt me? If
Uh-huh.
so, why?
And
Um,
you can't be annoyed at something. Like, quite often people somebody will do something to somebody else, and then that person will get really angry at them about it, yet
yeah,
hasn't said anything out loud. And
yeah,
it's like, you can't be angry at somebody for doing or not doing something, not saying thank you, not, like, giving you a birthday present, not turning up to something. You can't be angry at somebody until you've said something. And if they say sorry, or they give you a good enough reason or something like that, then okay, like, try to explore it. But if they say, well, I don't care, then you've got a problem and you've got
yeah.
a reason to be annoyed.
Yeah, or I was trying to really piss you off. But I mean, it can be quite difficult also to say. Like, I've done it before, where I go, look, I'm not proud about how I feel about this, but the thing you just said made me feel deeply insecure. And I know it's really, really irrational, but I think I must be at a really low ebb. And it's like, so don't now dance around me laughing and pointing, because that was really painful to tell you that.
Mm,
So I think it's really hard also to sometimes say how something has impacted you, because
mhm,
it's another humiliation.
mhm,
But I do agree that being able to say it is silent. Being angry and silent is just like the most irritating thing in the world, and
mhm,
very controlling, because of
mhm.
course you're just left filling all those gaps with all sorts of things.
I always say that it's like drinking bitterness and anger at somebody that doesn't even know that you're angry at them is like drinking poison and waiting for them to die. It's like, you can
Yeah,
that it's like, it's totally pointless. They're not
yeah,
getting affected by it. The only one that's dealing with it is you. You're sitting there stewing, and it's hurting your mental health. So what's the point?
yeah. Yeah, and also if they're never going to say, sometimes it's going to be something massively irrational as well. Like maybe you remind them of, their great granny who they really despised.
Mhm.
It could be something completely irrational. You can't always solve it, but
Mhm.
at least the conversation, you can go, all right. I remind you of your great granny. Well, that's fucking weird. I'm not going to worry anymore. In a
Yeah.
way, you can at least go, okay, right now I get it. But
Mhm.
that again is quite a difficult
Conversation to have.
conversation to have. I don't know why we're so like that. I,
Yeah.
and I mean, like British people are seen as being very uptight. Scottish people very much not talk about things, especially Scottish males. I think
Mhm.
you have a very hard kind of legacy as being a Scottish male, of not talking about feeling.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it does do it well, because there's the idea that America talk about their feelings, but I don't know if they do. I think they talk about their feelings in a certain way, in a kind
Mhm.
of packaged way that feels safe.
Mhm.
It's not a sort of like, I'm a mess.
I think it takes a lot of self-reflection and like confidence to be able to do it. And a lot of
Mm,
people are dealing with serious anxiety and they can't. They just don't
mm,
have the toolkit or
mm,
the knowledge. I think a lot of people, like with this spread, there's downside. There's obviously anxiety that comes from comparing on social media and things, but also the access to information and conversations like this, or on podcasts that talk about or explore these types of issues, allow people to tap into something that they've never really tapped into before,
mm.
which is the kind of power of collective knowledge on
Yeah,
these types of topics. So like the internet's such a powerful tool for being able to reflect on things and become more confident just by listening to other people who have got that toolkit, I guess.
yeah. I mean, in that sense, the Scrub project for me has been amazing, because it's very easy to just think, oh my God, everything's so shit. I actually think as a female, and if I had daughters, I would find it very, very difficult that, the portrayal of women continuously of in a certain way is very difficult. But the Scrubs thing was amazing in seeing how many people sort of got their act together and did something, and were saying really kind and generous things to each other,
Mhm.
when they felt like people had really hit a massive low. It was like, I want, I want to help you. And it was across the board, generational, male, female, whatever. And that was really nice to be kind of an observer on. I would see these kind of interactions where people would say things like, can I have a photo of you wearing, what I'm wearing? And then
Mm.
people would send it and go, I'd like to meet you one day. That was really nice. That was amazing, and
Yeah,
made me feel much more philosophical about, humans.
and community and
Yeah,
like society, like there is such a thing as people looking out for one another. And you see
yeah,
it in times like this, whereas in the good times, people would just feel like they don't need to take care of one another, so they just go about in their kind of selfish interests.
yeah. I think the idea, because people say, don't know their neighbors. I think maybe it's kind of just a different community in society. People do care. I always found that really weird. People would say in London people don't care about you, but I felt in London, if people really, if you asked and if you said, they did care.
Hmm.
They quite often just didn't want to get in your face.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember having that over, actually, having kids in a buggy. You'd be
Hmm.
going up you'd be like angry that God saying you've nailed life.
I don't know. There's somebody really wants to talk to me.
It's Steven Pinker. He's like, I need to
Yeah.
talk to you about some data. I got it really wrong.
No, it's actually falling apart.
That's right. Oh my God, it's all really bad. Have many people said to you they're having a really hard time?
um I don't know. I think it's probably, at the moment, I just think we should be so grateful that we live in a country where we can self-isolate, where we've
Yeah,
got a healthcare system that we can ramp up,
yeah,
and where we live in a country also where the government can borrow almost unlimited amounts of money to pay
yeah.
people for like almost probably a year.
Mm,
Like the amount of gratitude that we should have, and the amount of like the perspective that we're probably going to get when this thing spreads to you know, Africa and India and other countries where they don't have all of those kind of things. I think, you know, people don't, some people have it tough if you've fallen through the cracks with government assistance right now. But I mean, I think it's going to get hard for people, but and a lot of businesses are struggling at the moment, and it will get probably harder when places open up, but not fully. And you know, I've got some friends that run restaurants and things, and the idea of opening up a half open restaurant just doesn't make economic sense. So
no.
That's going to be a challenge in the kind of hospitality industry. But yeah, it's I mean, I just think we should just be so grateful that we're in the position where we can sit on our sofas and wait this thing out.
Yeah, it's hard to feel it though. I mean, my stock phrase at work is always when students are freaking out about something, is like, look, you could have been doing this in Syria. Think how pretty pissed you'd be about that if you were doing a course, you know, if you were a lawyer in Syria, if you're doing, it's like that place has been obliterated, you know, it's been a completely, I don't think there's even going to be anything left of Syria. And now they've got, you know, COVID now. You're just like, that is properly Armageddon. That is, you know, like literally hell on earth. And you're like, and that happened quite quickly, you know, that all happened. And so I'm always like, yeah, you could be in a really horrible scenario.
You could be in any other time in any other country, almost any other country in any other prior time in history, and have it so much worse than we've got it now. So but I think it's hard when people like are wrapped up in their own lives and something, you know, they've got their own problems, to have that perspective. But ultimately it's the only thing that's going to kind of keep you sane, if you can kind of put things in a broader context.
Yeah, but isn't it funny how you want to get down to I think people do go into minutia when it feels too much. You know, it's like, I'm going to really, really obsess about the, you know, Italian restaurant on my road never opening again and how terrible that is. You're like, it's not really that terrible in the scheme of things, but in a way it is, like it's something you can hold on to and get your head round. So you sort of fascinate about weird things, you know, or like crafting, you know, you're like, I'm gonna make this thing. I found myself doodling loads, and that's been really funny.
Oh, really?
And it must be a vague anxiety.
Yeah.
Like Easter, the kids were decorating an egg, and like they turned around and I'd made like a Fabergé version. You know, it was like really intense. And I was like, sorry, I think I got a bit kind of involved there. It's like, whoa, where did that come from?
It's kind of
really
like
intricate.
It's kind of like meditative. Like
completely.
When I'm doing yoga, like that's meditation for me, because you just focus on one thing and your head just like stops thinking about anything else. I kind of get that when I'm like coding. I kind of get that like in work, you know, if you're really heads down on something and you've got headphones in, like there's something, time just passes, and you stop overthinking on things, and that flow state is also a big part of meditation for me, because when if you're single-mindedly on something like doodling, then it can be kind of freeing in a way.
I'm laughing because my old tutor, my MA, she was amazing. She died about 5 years ago. She was nuts as well, Louise Wilson. She was like a really famous figurehead. She called that, when we would do it in our work, she'd call it visual masturbation, because you would do something which essentially you were finding quite pleasurable, you know. So you'd say, oh, but I spent 4 hours cutting this out and doing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And she'd go, yeah, but that's not what I fucking want. She was so aggressive. And she'd be like, you enjoyed that section, you know, and she'd be like, I want you to get that out and move on. You know, it wasn't necessarily productive, but as you said, exceptionally relaxing and pleasurable. And, you know, you would have it under the guise of, you know, work. You know, it's like, but I spent hours on this. And she was like, yeah, you fucking loved it. And it was like, and that's not what I want, you know?
It's like those games on the phone. What's that, Gem? I don't even know what the name of it is. Everyone plays these games on their phones and things, and they're totally not productive. They get to the next level and they just keep on playing and playing and playing. Just because it's like, it's almost like soothing in a way.
It's not many things I do like that. Again, we come back to religion, counting things, just, you know, like go and have 50 Hail Marys, you know. It's just a way of kind of being in thought, isn't it? Do you meditate every day?
No, I do a lot of yoga, obviously not at the night right now. I'm missing it a lot.
Do you not do it online at all?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of hot yoga, so I kind of was just so used to doing that. I probably should. I mean, I've been going out running a bit, and running can be the same type of thing. You just kind of lose yourself in just taking step after step after step. That's just you
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, that can be just exercise can be a really awesome way to just kind of de-stress. I always think if
yeah,
somebody's telling me that they're stressed, I'm like, go just go do some yoga, like
yeah, yeah,
before,
yeah,
or do some form of exercise before complaining about
yeah,
it. If you're
yeah,
still really upset and depressed after taking some action to like try to de-stress yourself and get um your energy back, then there's a problem. But often, sleep and exercise, and they solve a
it's
lot of
yeah,
problems.
the main thing. Yeah, I quite like running, but I had to stop because I did what everybody does, which was went out for a run as soon as we had to stay indoors, basically, because I was getting no. I don't have a car, so we do tons of walking.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the thing I've realized is I walk an enormous amount each day just through my life, and
Mhm.
so that's been really, really hard. But I went out for a run and I don't run, and my knees and my back, I mean, I'm just obviously not able to run, like I'm not fit enough to run. And that was really funny, suddenly realizing that, oh my god, I'm not like 18. I was quite shocked. But also what was quite funny was I had earphones on and I was listening to a podcast. I didn't realize how completely mental I looked, and people were literally diving away from me, one because they probably wanted to keep away from me, but two, I was like smiling and laughing. I didn't realize I was like running down the road like that. Like that. I suddenly realized I looked really, really terrifying. You could see people going like, "Oh my god, she's mad," like that. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I suppose I do." And I was like, I thought I would have learned a lesson. So I once did it in a gym where I was cross training, and I was really laughing at something, and people looked horrified. I realized it looked as though I was looking at like the rolling news on the monitor, like awful things happening, and I was going, "Oh, look at that hilarious thing happening." And I was like, "I'm doing it again. I'm laughing while I'm running. I mustn't laugh while I run." Better at walking, I think. But it
Yeah.
makes me realize I must walk, like, I don't know, several kilometers a day just through my life.
Mm.
And people always say that, oh my God, you don't have a car. But like a car in London would be absolutely painful.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I walk so much. So
Mm.
I'm going to look like Serge Gainsbourg by the end of this. I'm going to be fully in caftans for a long time after this.
Oh,
Just through not having the same level of exercise. I think
yeah,
some people are going to be way more fit, which is quite funny.
I know. It'll be funny coming out of this. Whatever.
Well, yeah, I won't
Yeah.
miss homeschooling, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Not yet.
I think soon, as soon as we come out of this, a lot of people are going to be looking back, thinking, you know what, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's it. It's been really interesting. People without kids are like, this is really nice,
Mhm.
and we're crafting.
Mhm.
And people with kids are like, this is hell on
Mhm.
earth.
Mhm. Mhm.
Especially people with boys because they're so physical. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm literally like just small children bouncing from sofas to beds. You
Mhm.
know, you just can't burn out their energy, you know.
Yeah.
And then they can't sleep, blah, blah. So a lot of people with kids, I think, are really, really
Yeah, really
struggling.
struggling. Yeah.
I mean, I'm like,
Getting them back to school.
yeah. And also, it's not fair. I've turned from their mum, and this is home, to their teacher in school.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're really angry. They're just
Yeah.
really angry about it. And I get
Well,
that, you
yeah.
know.
I was talking to um, a guy called Paul yesterday, and that I went to school with, and he's homeschooling as well. And he was, we were just saying, like, you can't judge yourself for not getting it right because you're not a teacher. So
Yeah,
everybody just needs to just accept that they're going to probably do a pretty bad job of it, but
yeah.
they're trying their best, and that's all you can do.
Mind you, I must be a nightmare because I teach, but older. And
Uh,
my youngest, 5, is having like Zooms with the teacher. And generally they're quite good. But a couple of times I've been like, that's bollocks. I've been like, that's really confusing. And then I've like leaned over and I'm muted and gone, excuse me. Like, you're doing something really confusing there. And like twice they've had to go, oh yeah, I see what you mean. And I'm like, oh my God, is this happening all the time? These poor kids must be. One of them was you had to say as smooth as a, and there were options. And this poor kid said as smooth as a dolphin. And they said, no, that's not right. And the answer was as smooth as a fish. And I was like,
Sorry.
sorry, all of that was confusing. It was like, why is the dolphin wrong and the fish is right? I was like, I'm so confused. a little 5-year-old sitting there looking kind of crestfallen. You were like, oh my God. And one of the masked ones where they had, do you remember as a kid, they have a square that has 100 in it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
They were saying that if you go up the square, that's like taking away a 10. Going down would be adding a 10 if you looked at the columns.
Right.
Quite conceptually quite difficult, I have to say.
Yeah, I would say I'm struggling.
Yeah, so if you said like 20 take away 10, that means you go down 10 because you take away. But on the square, you're actually going up if you think about it.
Oh.
And so she would now and again say to a kid, so if I get 20 and I take away 10, what am I doing? And they'd be like, going up. And I'd be like, well, no, it's less, isn't it? Because it's 10. And I was like, big finger, like unmuting. Yeah, but you're going up the square. And it ended with her just going, we just have to teach it like that because it's part of the curriculum.
There's going to be like...
So we've all agreed it's not very good. She's a bit like, yeah.
There's gonna be a note going around saying, could all parents please refrain?
Yeah, don't let Oonagh. Okay. But I was a bit like, this is so confusing. She's like, so is it up going up or going down? And the kids, you can see them all going like, I have no idea anymore. And you're like, this is just subtraction. It's so difficult. I was like, oh, so there you go. So I might be doing an okay job. They're doing an okay job. Everyone's just doing an okay job.
Everyone's doing what they can.
Exactly.
I think we're all chatted out after 2 hours. That's like a lot. I think we've done well.
You can tell I've not talked to many humans bar my work colleagues.
It's been awesome.
You're okay. I'm like that. You're right. I'm like downloaded on you.
No, it's brilliant. This has been absolutely brilliant. I've been thinking I'd just do like an hour for some of them, and then some of my friends were like, maybe you could cut them shorter, but then I just love chatting to you so much. So.
I've not even introduced you to on my bookshelf. I've got some amazing, because I'm part of a book club by accident. I didn't want to join. I quite regularly end up in things by accident.
Right.
I'm in a book club and we read loads of really actually long books. And the other day we did a Zoom one, and just to piss them all off, it was really funny while we were talking about the book, I was like that, yeah, that's really good. I'm pretending to read a Barbara Cartland. I've got an amazing book, so I recommend it. Have you seen it?
Nice.
Beautiful,
nice.
beautiful
Love it.
Yeah, it's the romance of food. It's absolutely hilarious.
I'm quite bad for not reading. I've just made a decision.
Look at those beautiful pictures. That is apparently the art of love there on a table.
Nice.
Not so sure.
Do you know what? I've just decided, and I don't know whether this is the right or wrong thing, but I've just decided not to read fiction until I'm like 80 or 90, and I'm like, well, I don't have much of a life now anyway, so I'm just gonna like disappear off into fiction land and read all the classics.
Quite a nice thing to look forward to. I mean, I've found it quite irritating that for some of the books I've read have just been utter shite, and I feel really time poor, and so I'm angry, and I've been in the book group and gone, can I just say, also about 3 of the books, the female in it is a creative, and she's confused and torrid and poor. And I'm like, can we just get rid of that boring stereotype that if you're creative, you're ditzy and poor? I was like, I know loads of creatives that are really hardcore, very organized, and very rich. And I was like, I'm bored of this character. So many of the books were like, this sad woman and she's done this. I was like, I am bored of this. I mean, we read Sapiens. That was quite good.
That's awesome. I love that book.
Yeah. But like, I felt like I read it like 5 years too late, Yeah. I like the bit about the sheep where they said the naughty thin sheep got away, and that's how they ended up breeding the slow fat sheep for wool. I quite like to think that somewhere there's a whole posse of naughty thin sheep that are like not getting sheared. That are just like,
yes, screw you guys.
Yeah. I was like, where are the naughty sheep? I want to meet the naughty sheep.
There's so much in that book that was weird about, particularly. What blew my mind was, we're just going to do another hour, aren't we?
Oh my God, this is going to be like installments.
No.
If you can put this into any themes, wow.
No, I think I'm gonna have to like timestamp this.
Yeah. Maybe you needed to have given me themes, like
No,
flashcard themes.
no, it's called Unplanned for a reason.
What was the bit you liked? And you said there was a bit in Sapiens you
There was a
liked.
bit I like. No, I found it weird, mind blowing when they said that in the same way that there's like different species of cat, like cheetah, lion, and then domestic cat, like for example. But then you might have domestic cats that are different colors. That's the same way the difference between species and races.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and the difference between a species and a race is when they don't mate together, or when they do mate together, they don't make a child.
Yeah,
Where it's
yeah.
different, a black cat and a tabby cat would
Can
make
make,
a,
yeah,
a
yeah,
baby, a
yeah,
baby
because they're the
cat.
same species. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And the mind-blowing bit in that book was that there were 5 different other species of
I know.
homo, like human,
Yeah.
and that was like mind-blowing. And then the point where you're like, okay, so where did they go? And then you're like, we're mean. Like there's some weird stuff that's gone on in the past.
Have you ever read the book by William Golding, who did Lord of the Flies, called The Inheritors? It's about that, and it's really sad. And I'm going to ruin it. There's like the ones that are obviously us eventually that are really mean, and it's all about this other group that are really nice and kind, but they're just not quite as on it. And there's a really sad bit where I remember we discussed it at school, where they're called like Ha and Moo and whatever, and Ha can't find his friend, and the scent runs out at the edge of a cliff, and he's just a bit like, where the fuck's this guy gone? And then there's one of the creepy us human sapiens that are lurking, and we're really kind of sinister in the book, and these other ones are really lovely and sweet, and there's this really sad scene where he's just like, can't put it all together. He's like, the smell runs out at the end of this massive cliff, and where's my friend gone? And you're like, oh, it's so sad, I can't bear it. But it's a really good book exactly about that we're the arseholes.
I think, yeah. And like then we did it. I mean, he doesn't describe in the book whether it was genocide or whether it was us just stealing all the food, not leaving anything left. But either way, we've just been assholes in the past, clearly, in some way, shape, or form.
But don't they say that everybody thinks they're the good people in every kind of conflict? You know, like nobody thinks they're the enemy. Everybody thinks they're. I don't know about that. Do they always think they're the good? I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure there are people who think they're baddies.
And they're just cool with it.
Well, I think some people, that is their strategy, you know. I mean, I think the Nazis managed to get that covered quite well. You know,
but they also
terrorizing people, you know.
But they probably did. They probably thought that they were doing it for the greater good, which was like Darwinism and survival of the fittest, and that's what they thought, that the Aryan race was supreme. So
yeah, they totally believed it. But I suppose what I meant was they did it. They went for full kind of terror, you know, like even down to a really weird level. If we're talking about aesthetics on a very objective level, I obviously don't think Nazis are good, but their uniform is renownedly known as being fucking terrifying. You know, they nailed, we're going to terrify you. And I suppose it's in like the clips that ISIS put out, you know, it's all about, we're going to absolutely terrify the fuck out of you. That is going to be our strategy. You know, it's not going to be sneaky, fly. It's just total terror, you know. And the Nazis were good at that. You know, they had a brilliant font, you know, brilliant uniforms, you know, propaganda was their absolute, you know, shtick. And it nearly worked. It was so close to working. I mean,
that's the thing about fear versus love. Fear is so much easier to get people to unite behind, whereas love of or vision of some description that's like of a positive world, you need to create a story that other people buy into, that they believe can actually happen, whereas fear of the other is so easy because you can just choose anyone, and then you can unite people around that. So it's a shame that we kind of gravitate towards fear-based kind of manipulation and things like that.
But I wonder
more.
if it's also chemical and like it's like violence, you know, it heightens an adrenaline in you. So as a way, it sort of heightens all the same things that, you know, sex or addiction or things would do. So fear in a way has such an energy around it that it
Mhm.
has an addictive. It's like people who need drama, you know, in their life. You know, it's like they need to feel like there's something. It's almost like it keeps your body going in a way.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Whereas the idea of content or calm can make people feel not alive in a way.
mhm.
So you wonder if there's a chemistry, you know, it's like heightening people into a state of something as
Yeah,
opposed to this kind of like plateau, you know.
yeah.
So I wonder if it's also got a sort of, you know, a biological element to it as well.
But then again, anyone that's like an entrepreneur that's built a company, or like revolutionaries that have created, you know, nations or these types of things, they've painted a vision of something incredible, and then they've tried to like rally people around it.
Yeah,
And that is like almost the other version of rallying people, but it takes like somebody with like leadership and the ability to tell a story that's
yeah, to do it. Yeah,
to do it. But
yeah.
you know, it's two different ways.
Well, that's what it is. A lot of politics is just storytelling, isn't it? And if you
Yeah.
buy into it, I sometimes can't think about it because you're sometimes so convinced by political speakers that they know what they're doing. You feel so confident in it, and sort of it's so reassuring. And then now and again, you think, "Oh, we've never been that age before." Do you know what I mean? It's like I remember one time realizing David Cameron was much younger than I thought at the time, and realizing I was older. I can't remember, and being like, "Oh my God, he's just clueless." You know, it's like, oh my God, he doesn't know. He doesn't know if this is going to work. You know, it's like, just suddenly was this horrible moment of they don't really know. They're just really
they're just
convincing.
they're just saying it with they're just saying it with
Really
confidence.
sensibly. Yeah. And you're like, ah.
Uh,
The Scrubs was a bit like that. It was like, shit, nobody's got a plan here at all, you know.
yeah.
And yeah, it's like we said, structures that are just kind of made for us, and you suddenly realize they're not
You
real.
just need to tell somebody that something's real, and then believe it so much yourself that you're gonna you're gonna direct everyone to going in this type of direction. But it's like you've got to harness that energy of people somehow, and people are looking for leaders, or people are looking for somebody who wants to do something, but it's not often the people like do it in the right way, and
Yeah,
they have the credibility to do it.
yeah.
But
You're right. Also, it's that own self-belief. I won't. We won't carry on. But I'm really interested in the idea of luck because people who genuinely believe they're lucky, it's really interesting how much they can manipulate and bring people in to
yeah.
that. You know, and actually, you know, I've met people who talked about themselves lucky, and actually, you could say they were devious, manipulative. But it was really funny. They perceived it all as luck and fortune and things just happening, and it
Yeah,
was really funny because it was something that actually was very productive for them because if people bought into it.
yeah.
And it was funny, it was like their own PR in a way, but they
Mhm,
genuinely believed it as
mhm,
well.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's legacy as well. That's family legacy, how it's been sort of pitched to
Drilled,
you.
yeah, put into
Yeah,
you,
yeah, that
like,
you're lucky. You're not, you know, you didn't, you know, cheat on something. It was luck, you know. You're like,
yeah.
they cheated, you know.
I
So
kind of remember being told that, you know, whenever anything was going bad in life, when I was growing up, I remember my mum would tell me, you know, you come from a lucky family, it's all going to turn out all right in the end.
oh, that's really amazing.
And I just get that kind of always stuck with me. And some people, I mean, there's what, you know, you can call it entitlement if you want, or privilege, but then other people, you could call it, you know, just belief. Like there's a negative spin on it that you could
Yeah,
be,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
But in
then
a way,
but
that's quite nice. You basically were saying have a belief in yourself and the unit. I mean,
yeah.
what I was saying was the person that I was talking about. Like they once gave me an analogy about finding something
Uh-huh.
and keeping it, and I was like, well, if you know who the person it belongs to is, then that's stealing it. But they genuinely saw it as like a lucky find. And you know, it was like the language, the manipulation of the language was really interesting because
Yeah,
they justified to themselves with something that I thought was actually quite negative.
yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like, you know, hey, it's like that one, you made me angry, you know.
Uh-huh. It's
It's not
it's the story you tell yourself.
it's the story you tell yourself. Yeah. That can be
Yeah.
our ending.
Yeah.
It's a story you tell yourself.
You can make anything your own reality.
It's a story you tell yourself.
Hey, listen, this has been awesome.
So sorry it went on for so long. I'm
No,
so
it's
sorry.
been,
Do you know children have been in and out of the room in
Have
the
they?
meantime? Yeah, looking sad that mummy didn't come in to read to them.
Oh.
I've been like that. Get away. At least it didn't come in and streak. I've had that happen. That's awful. Right, I will let you get on. Good luck with editing.
Yeah, right. I'm just gonna leave it. I'll put a little comment or something, but yeah, no.
Saying like if you've got really nothing going on in your life.
Well, the best bit is like, yeah, people are just gonna see this and they're not gonna see. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably just do you know what? Actually, most of the videos that I've done so far, I've like made a little comment about, oh yeah, in this conversation we talked about X, Y, Z, you know, A, B, C, D. And this one, I'm like, where am I even gonna start? I have to write an essay.
You're like, in the prequel we covered, and in the sequel we'll cover. I'm really sorry.
No, it's been great. It's been great.
Right. Anyway, good luck with it.
Thanks.
Lovely to see you as well.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. All right.
Catch up.
Bye.
Much love. Bye.